but he cares about something more than that. He cares about his own self, right? And so he says it was perfectly clear that he just ought to walk away, right? But he also knew I wasn't going to do any such thing. He says, I was a poor shot with the rifle and the ground was soft. If he charged and I missed him, I would have about as much chance to get out of him as a toad under a steamroller, right? And he says, and it wasn't even that I was afraid of that. I was more afraid of what would happen if I made a fool of myself with all of these yellow eyes watching me. He says, a white man mustn't be frightened in front of natives, and so in general, he isn't frightened. Right? He psychs himself up to thinking that nothing will scare him because he's not allowed to. I mean, think about that kind of life, right? So he shoots the elephant, right? And he says they give a low, happy sigh when they see he's going to act. And again, the curtain going up in the theater. So again, this idea that he is acting, he's performing for them, right? And so he shoots the elephant, right? And he describes what's happening. He hears the devilish roar of glee. So again, devilish roar. Remember again the word choice, how he's characterizing these people. But he then explains what happens to the elephant. And what he finds out is that he didn't shoot the elephant in the right place. And he continues shooting him, and he kind of sags and the elephant falls to its knees, but he's still not dead. And he takes his gun and he puts the other cartridges in his gun into it. Again, it's not the right way. The Burmans rush by him and watch him slowly dying. He says, I waited a long time for him to die, but his breathing did not weaken. Finally, I fired my 2 remaining shots into the spot where I thought his heart would be, right? And then he went back and got his small rifle and he poured shot after shot into his heart and down his throat. But that didn't seem to affect it, right? And finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He leaves, and he later learned that it took the elephant half an hour to die. And then the Burmans came and they basically stripped the meat down to the bone, right? So again, if he didn't want to look foolish, we got to ask ourselves, did he actually accomplish that by killing the elephant? Because he looked foolish. He didn't know what he was doing. So this last paragraph is the conclusion. It's what happened. It's, okay, what happened because of this. And he basically tells us that, boy, they sure talked a lot. There was endless discussion. The older Brits thought he did the right thing, right? The owner was mad, right? But the owner was an Indian himself, and so he didn't have any rights. The younger soldiers thought that I had killed the elephant, and that was a mistake because that was a valuable piece of property, and all it had done was kill a worthless coolie, right? And then he says legally he was in the right because it had killed a man, and if the elephant was mad and the owner couldn't control it, then that was the recourse legally, right? But he tells us that he was really glad the coolie died because it actually gave him a legal line, right? Even though the coolie's life didn't have a whole lot of value, it still had technically killed, right? And so he could maybe use as excuse, well, if he wouldn't have stopped there, he might have killed someone that actually was important, right? He says it gave him sufficient pretext for shooting the elephant. But then here's the confessional part of this. He says, I often wondered whether any of the others grasped that I had done it solely to avoid looking a fool. So this is where he tells us, this is, again, remember he says it was enlightening, the story about what happened. And this is what happens with imperialism, that people do horrible, horrible things in order to look good, in order to maintain some illusion of power. And he says that, even though he had all this justification, his real motivation is he just didn't want to look like a fool, right? And so there's your story. Again, there are just so many things that you can explore here. You can think about, what is significant about the cultural conflict here. What is the motivation for him to act that's driven by his being British, by his being other, right? Where is he acting because he feels like he has to act because of other people's expectations, right? Where is he doing it to himself? Where is he giving up free will when he could have free will? He could have chosen something different. He would have had consequences, right? But I think what he understands, remember, you have two Orwells in this story. You have the Orwell who was telling the story 10 years after this event happened, roughly, right? The wiser Orwell who has had time to think about it and ponder and reflect. Then you have the Orwell who is the 19-year-old that is actually in the middle reacting in real time, right? And I think that the older Orwell is telling us that, he now realizes that he only did it to look like a fool. And why did he make that choice? I think that's one of the reasons that he wrote the story. He's trying to figure out why. Why would someone do something like this? And his answer is that, well, it's imperialism is an evil thing. And it's destructive to everybody inside it, not just the people who are being oppressed, the natives, but imperialism is oppressive even to the oppressors, right? It has taken away, just as it has taken away the Burmese rights to act and choose for themselves, it has also taken away Orwell's right to act and choose for himself. They are all so rigidly involved in this battle. Everybody has this defined role, and he has no right to act out of it according to his training, right? And he's saying that that's bad, right? Okay, so your next step is thinking about possible themes and then crafting thesis statements and topic sentences to support whatever way you want to interpret it. You'll see examples of those things. You'll see example of an essay for this assignment to kind of give you an idea of what to do and how to use those quotes and sources from the story to back up. So look at that example, not necessarily to see about what to write, but how to put this all together. Look at how in the body paragraphs I make a clear statement to support my thesis, I explain it, and then I use pieces from the story to support it, and then I give you the takeaway about then what does all this mean, okay? So I'll look forward to reading your essays.